The war. Though the Goryeo borders as set out by King Taejo are almost identical to those that surround the Korean peninsula today, they were witness to numerous skirmishes and invasions. Notable among these were the Khitan Wars of the 10th and 11th centuries, fought against Proto-Mongol groups of the Chinese Liao dynasty. The Khitan had defeated Balhae just before the fall of Silla and were attempting to gain control over the whole of China as well as Korean peninsula. But three great invasions failed to take Goryeo territory, and a peace treaty was eventually signed. 2 centuries later came the Mongol Horish. The Korean peninsula was part of the Eurasian landmass, and therefore a target for the Great Khans. Under the rule of Khan, the first invasion came in 1231, but it was not until the sixth campaign, which ended in 1248, that Goryeo finally became a vassal state, a series of forced marriages effectively making its leaders part of a Mongol royal family. This lasted among a century before King Gongmin took advantage of a weakening Chinese Mongol Yuan dynasty. Founded by Kublai Khan to regain independence. The Mongol annexation came at a great human cost, one ensures in a gradual worsening of Goryeo economy and social structure. Gongmin made an attempt at reform, pulling the top ranks of those he felt to be pro-Mongol, but this instilled fear of yet more change into the Yangban elite. In conjunction with a series of decidedly non-Confucian love triangles and affairs with young boys. This was to lead to his murder. His young and unprepared successor, King Yu, was pushed into battle with the Chinese Ming dynasty. Joseon's general Lee Seung-gae led the charge, but fearful of losing his soldiers, he stopped at the border and returned to Seoul, forcing the abdication of the king and putting Yu's young son Chang on the throne. The general decided that he was not yet happy with the arrangement and had both Yu and Chang executed, the latter just 8 years old at the time. After one more failed attempt at putting the right puppet king on the throne, he decided to take the mantle himself and in 1392 declared himself King Taejo, the first leader of the Joseon dynasty. The Joseon dynasty. The Joseon era started off much the same as the Goryeo dynasty had almost 5 centuries beforehand, with a militaristic king named Taejo on the throne, a name that translates as the great ancestor. Joseon was to last even longer with a full 27 kings, ruling from 1392 until the Japanese annexation in 1910. Taejo moved the capital from Kaesong to Seoul and immediately set about entrenching his power with a series of mammoth projects. The first few years of his reign saw the wonderful palace of Gyeongbokgung, the ancestral shrine, the Jongmyo, and a gate-studded city wall go up. His vision was quite astonishing. The chosen capital and its palace and shrine remain to this day. Together, its section of the wall, more grand palaces would go up in due course, with another 4 and some points home to the royal throne. From the start of the dynasty, Buddhism declined in power, and Confucianism permitted society yet falter in its stead. Joseon's social system became even more hierarchical in nature, with the king and other royalty at the top and the hereditary Yangban class of scholars and aristocrats just beneath, then various levels of employment towards the servants and slaves and the bottom of the pile. All of the social strata were governed by heredity, but the Yangban became ever more powerful as the dynasty progressed, gradually starting to undermine the power of king. They were viewed as a world apart by the commoners and placed great emphasis on study in a country that wrote with Chinese characters. In the 1440s, King Sejong resigned 1418 to 1450, devised Hangul, a new and simple local script that all classes could read and write. The Yangban were not fond of this, and it was banned at the beginning of the 16th century, lying largely dormant until beached by waves of nationalist sentiment created by the end of Japanese annexation in 1945. The Japanese invasions. In 1892, under the command of feared warlord Hideyoshi, Japan set out to conquer the Ming Dynasty, with China a stepping stone toward possible domination of the whole Asian continent. The Korean Peninsula had the misfortune to be both in the way and loyal to the Ming. And after King Sonjo refused to allow Japanese troops safe passage, Hideyoshi mustered all his military power and unloaded the lot at Korea. After 2 relatively peaceful centuries, the Joseon dynasty was ill prepared for such an assault, and within a month the Japanese had eaten up most of the peninsula. The advance was halted with forces from a Ming dynasty, keen to defend its territory. By the time of the second main wave attacks in 1597, Korean Admiral Lee Sun-shin had been able to better prepare found themselves losing battle after battle. Undone by Admiral E's total ships, vessels proclaimed by Koreans as the world's first armored warships. The Hermit Kingdom. The Japanese attacks, together with the dynasty transfer from Ming to Qing in China in the 1690s, which led to Joseon becoming a vassal state forced to spend substantial sums paying tribute to the emperors in Beijing, prompted Korea to turn inward and became known as the Hermit Kingdom, one of which outsiders knew little and saw even less. One exception was a Deutsche ship which crashed off Jeju Island in 1653 en route to Japan. The survivors were kept prisoner for 13 years but finally managed to escape. The accounts of Heinrich Hamel provided the Western world with one of its first windows in the isolationist Korea. The Deutsch prisoner has entered the land of which corruption and factionalism were rife, one that achieved little social or economic stability until the rule of King Yeongjo, 1724-76, who authorized the pools of crooked officials in 1767 inside the grounds of Changnyeonggung Palace. He forced Sado, his son and the country's crown prince, into a rice basket, locked the flap and left him inside to starve rather than let the country fall into his hands. Sado's son, Jeongjo, came to revolt of Korea's king, instigating top to bottom reform to wrench power from the Yangban elite and allowing for the creation of the small middle class. The lot of the poor man gradually improved.